Director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History at the Chicago History Museum. And through the magic of screen sharing that you all are much more used to than I am going to take us through not only a PowerPoint, but just some looking at some resources that we have related to oral history at the Chicago History Museum. So the first bit is those oral history resources, how to find them in various places on our website. And then the second part, really the heart of the PowerPoint, will be kind of running through some basics of working with primarily middle and high school students around oral history. And then, you know, any opportunity for questions and answers should you have any. And so we'll go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, I'm Peter Alter, Chief Historian and Director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History at the Chicago History Museum. I've been at CHM for a little over 21 years. I started in the summer of 1999. I almost said 1919, but not quite that long ago, but 1999. I've been a public historian, a curator, an archivist, a historian, now chief historian, and I've been the director of our Studs Terkel Center for Oral History since the spring of 2015, so about 5.5 years. The first thing I'm going to do is just go through some kind of screen grabs of how to actually dig down into the labyrinth that is chicagohistory.org to find some of these materials. So the first thing, go to our website, chicagohistory.org, hover over the collections tab, and then go down to museum collections, and then then there's sort of a more logical progression after that to get to some of our basically oral histories that have been recorded in the last 10 to 15 years. Many of those projects have a youth engagement component to them, sort of thinking about you all as teachers and the history fair projects. So if you've been at CHM from October to March or from July to now, you might have seen American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago. It's our most recently opened major exhibition. And it is actually based, the exhibition is actually based on the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project, which began in the fall of summer of 2016. We've collected about 152 oral histories. And starting in the spring of last year through the fall of last year, we recruited, hired, and trained 8 local American Muslim youth. All of them at the time were high school students. Some graduated and went on to college, but stayed here locally. They worked with us on a paid part-time basis to collect 17 out of those 150 oral histories. And I think 4 or 6, I've forgotten the number, but roughly 4, 5, or 6 of their interviews appear excerpted in the exhibition. So the exhibition is totally based on these oral histories. The way to access 20 of the 150 interviews in transcript form is here through our oral history collection part of our website. So if you click on any one of these, it will take you to a short biography of an individual and then the full transcript that is a Word document and can be downloadable. So there are some interviews here that are actually conducted by high school students in teams of like 2 to 6. Our next project, again in the same place, is 40 Blocks the East Garfield Park Oral History Project, which we did in 2016 with a community partner called Breakthrough Urban Ministries in the West Side community of East Garfield Park. There's about 27 oral histories here. I think 25 of those were conducted by middle and high school students. The youngest students were in 6th grade, the oldest were first-year high school students. All from West Side communities, East and West Garfield Park, Austin, and Humboldt Park. And so we collaborated with these youth and their mentors at this community organization to conduct these oral histories. So if you're wondering like, well, what is it like when, you know, a 6th grader, an 8th grader, and a 9th grader conduct oral histories? Listen to these. They're all here with actually this interview set is full transcripts and full audio. The Chicago Cold War Oral History Project is not youth engaged. It's kind of predates my period as the director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History, but it is some useful information and could be great fodder for history fair projects. It documents the impact of the Cold War on Chicago and vice versa. There's about that same number, 25 to 30 interviews there, full audio, full transcripts. One project that I forgot that should have been top of mind as a result of the Chicago 7 movie on Netflix that came out last Friday. It's decent if you haven't seen it, if you're interested in the 68 DNC and that trial in 69 and 70. In 2008, for now what seems like ancient times, we did a 40th anniversary interviewing project related to the 1968 Democratic National Convention. And I just was an oversight. It wasn't youth engaged, but we did collect, again, about 25 or 30 oral histories. One other place where you can listen to interviews is our SoundCloud page. So soundcloud.com/Chicago Museum. And there we have about 20, more than 20, actually about 25 full audio files for the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project, some excerpted oral histories from that same project, and then a few excerpts from our Poles in Chicago project, which is all like the East Garfield Park project, completely youth engaged. We recruited Polish American youth from the city and suburbs, from the cultural Saturday and Sunday schools, and we trained them. We worked together to learn methods of oral history. We conducted some interviews here in the spring of 2018. Then the summer of 2018, we went to Warsaw and conducted interviews of folks in the Polish diaspora who had lived in the Chicago area but had decided to return there for different reasons rather than live permanently in the US. We linked up with a group of Warsaw area youth, also middle and high school students by our standards, and they formed interview teams of 4 each and conducted interviews. So some of the English language interviews from the Poles in Chicago project are excerpted on our SoundCloud page. And so again, for Poles in Chicago, that would be another totally youth-led project. Then the last couple are videos that you could access. This is from our YouTube channel, Teen Stories of Muslim Chicago. Is actually the 5.5 minute documentary film that introduces in our galleries the American Medina Stories of Muslim Chicago, and it's interviews and reflections of 7 of those 8 youth who worked with us as teen historians. So they talk about what it was like to conduct interviews, and you see them actually conducting interviews. So that's available on our YouTube channel, and I think is good fodder and very short. A little bit longer, at about 18 minutes or so, is the documentary film that came out of the 40 Blocks project, the East Garfield Park Oral History Project. Again, we worked with Breakthrough Urban Ministries, which is here, kind of in the middle of the screen, the bottom of the screen grab. This West Side community organization, and they had a team of youth, 9 youth who did the interviews with us, and then they filmed those interviews. We audio recorded them and made that part of our collections. They took the film and made a great documentary film. So you actually see them conducting interviews, and they narrate the film, they put the film together. So it's, I think, a great kind of tool, especially if you have students interested in doing oral histories for the history fair. The last little resource bit is the Studs Terkel Radio Archive. So that well-known self-described disc jockey, TV and radio actor, author, Pulitzer Prize winner, oral historian and historian, Studs Terkel, when he retired from WFMT in the 1990s, came to Chicago, the then Chicago Historical Society as a scholar in residence. Part of the deal from WFMT is that he would come to us with his 7,000 or so radio and book tapes. So several thousand of those 7,000 are available through studsterkel.wfmt.com. Of course, none of those are youth inflected, but many of them would bear directly on a lot of natural history fair projects like civil rights. various cultural and social movements, because Studs was interviewing everyone. My favorite interview that's available through the website is an interview that Studs does of Martin Luther King in Mahalia Jackson's home on the South Side, not long after the March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr. having won the Nobel Peace Prize. So they're sitting in Mahalia Jackson's bedroom. She's not feeling well that day, and it's just a fascinating interview. And you can also kind of imagine that setup. Okay, with an eye on time, for sort of questions and answers and any interaction that we might have before everyone is whisked away. Yeah, we have 7:55, so we're in pretty good shape. The next several slides are actually slides that I use for various purposes, training high school students, working with teachers and high school students and community partners, primarily in North Lawndale, that West Side community. Last year, North Lawndale celebrated the 150th birthday, or its sesquicentennial, of its annexation to the city of Chicago, 1869 to 2019. So from 2016 to 2019, we worked with high school students at DRW College Prep, part of the Noble Charter System, North Lawndale College Prep, the Collins campus, and Herzl Elementary School on Douglas, to record oral histories of community members, of current and former residents and community stakeholders. And so often we worked with APUSH students, AP Gov, in that sort of 3 to 4 week period after they had taken the AP exam, and the teachers were just, what the hell are we going to do? And so we often came in to kind of fill that gap, and it was a lot of fun for us. So these are actually slides that I spiffed up a little bit, but that I've used directly with teachers and students and community partners in North Lawndale, but also the Poles in Chicago project, both here at CHM and also at the Polish History Museum in Warsaw, Poland. So some sort of thoughts and tips about helping students select who would be appropriate people to interview. So interviewees, or we say in oral history, narrators, because people are narrating their lives, their own personal stories. Oh, and these seem very common sense, but they're good things to kind of sort of enforce with your, upper elementary, middle school, or junior high school and high school students. Oral history narrators should have an important relationship to the project topic. They should be people who are willing and interested in being interviewed. Some people have awesome experiences, but just don't want to be interviewed, or maybe don't want to be interviewed by a student. And so we can't force anyone into that setting, but that's something to remember. And then, of course, sometimes people who've had a lot of wonderful and important experiences are very busy talking to others about their experiences, running nonprofits, holding important jobs. So we also need to be sure that folks are actually available for a 30-minute interview, maybe to come to school or right after school, sort of hoping for non-pandemic times, or even to link up via Zoom or Google Meet or whatnot. So one of the things that we believe, and I think I've noticed in working with primarily middle and high school students, is that oral history, whatever, if they really could care less about oral history, never do another interview again, we feel that there are some tools either that they build or hone or come into for the first time, conducting oral histories that are really kind of helpful for future success in their educational careers, as well as beyond school. And so, in non-pandemic times, we encourage students to shake hands, but they need to introduce themselves, make their interviewee or narrator feel comfortable, explain again, I'm doing this project on the 1968 Democratic National Convention for the National History Fair. I hope to go to nationals, and I want to interview you about your experiences as part of the Yippies in 1968, and your role in the Days of Rage in 1969, and so on. And then there's common sense things like, you know, silence the phones and unplug the office phone and silence the dog, put the dog outside if that's possible. I did an interview once with a bird in the background, not a good idea, chirping the entire time. We often encourage especially in the North Lawndale and the polls in Chicago setting, students to kind of tag or slate the interview at the beginning. And the images that are on the slides are all from our North Lawndale and polls in Chicago or East Garfield Park projects. So these are all young people and narrators with whom we've worked. So this is an interview with Peter Alter on October 20th, 2020 as part of the Chicago Chicago History Museum's Oral History Project. Those other things that help you in educational settings and also beyond that, sort of maintaining eye contact, be aware of your body language. When we do these trainings in person, we work a lot with active listening skills. We do some skills around noticing your own body language as well as the body language of your interviewee or narrator. And those are often fun because they allow kind of people to the students especially, to get to know us from CHM a little bit better. Using broad and brief questions, could you tell us about your time in the military? What was it like to fight in Vietnam? What was it like to grow up on the West Side? What was it like to meet Martin Luther King Jr.? Studs Terkel always said the next question is always the gentlest question, and then what happened? And while although I run the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History, you know, I don't have a tattoo of studs on my bicep or anything, but that is some really, I think, good and solid advice for anyone, anywhere doing oral history. So just other things to remember, you know, we generally want to avoid yes or no questions. Some yes or no questions are fine as long as we do some follow-ups, like, did you go on to college? Yes, I did. Okay, tell us about your college experience. Where did you go? So those kinds of things that you might not necessarily know about your narrator, you need to get maybe some of that information through the yes or no and then build from there. Be flexible with your topics and questions. So don't kind of always just stick literally to your list of questions. If someone brings up something that you didn't expect to hear about, follow up on that. And that's really those last two bullets on this slide are the same kind of. One thing that we've noticed, or at least that I've noticed, especially working in schools on the West Side, is that the students who are more in their sort of, for lack of a better word, more introverted and maybe more into like that web research and really digging deep into a specific topic like the background of an oral history narrator or interviewee, they really often excel in two areas, the preparation and the follow-up questions. The students maybe who aren't as interested in the background research, but who are often a little more extroverted, they really excel in just, hi, how are you? This is our project. Please sit down, make yourself comfortable, and also just kind of thinking on their feet if topics come up that they didn't expect. So at least when we do our interviews in groups, that's kind of really helpful skills that overlap each other. In certain settings, the top bullet, we encourage that it's not a conversation, that we're not constantly interrupting folks. But I would say, especially towards the end of interviews, especially where maybe you're working with students who are interviewing people from their own community, that they really have that opportunity. Oh, you grew up on the West Side, you grew up on the South Side. You also went to school here. Oh, you graduated 30 years ago. Well, what was school like back then? And then some other questions, you know, that dug a little deeper, especially in North Lawndale. Students wanted to ask adults basically, you know, how did you let the West Side be this way? Why is there so much violence? Was it this violent when you were a kid? And so also that back and forth. You know, we often think that young people will get a lot from their elders, but, you know, we really see it as kind of a 50-50 two-way street. let's see. Then the last slide, other than my name and email address before I stop sharing, is this just dropping in a worksheet that we've used. We developed especially for DRW College Prep, kind of working with their homeroom students, and then it expanded into APUSH and AP Gov and so forth. The 5 kind of markers across the bottom are taken from an article called Oral History for Texans, which actually you can find on the Baylor University Institute for Oral History's website. But we boiled these things down and made it useful for Chicagoans too. So there's that idea of silence, that you need to listen, and we work on that through active listening. There's encouragement, yes, okay, keep going. There's that elaboration. Well, someone mentions that they went to the same high school. Well, what was it like when you were here 20 years ago? Clarification, someone says 1919 and they actually mean 1991. So just make sure you have your facts right. And then the last one is something that I've said multiple times, is that idea of change. And so the interview may go in different ways that you don't expect it. The other thing I'd like to do is just offer up my own personal services in this virtual world. I'd be happy to, with a link, jump into sort of a one-on-one or one-on-two or a classroom discussion of oral history, even go through these slides. So you can reach me. Easiest way to reach me is my email address, my last name, Alter, @chicagohistory.org. So I see we've got about 3 minutes. The last thing I want to say is just some things that I said earlier to the first group, but kind of forgot specifically with this group. So through the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History, we do collaborative community-based oral history projects using history, tools of history and oral history for goals of social justice. So we really think that that sits well with this idea of lived civics and informed action, that we're encouraging students to develop the tools and use the tools that they already have to explore the past and the present and the future of their communities, to question why things are the way they are, and to really understand kind of how and where they fit within the sort of fabric of the history of the city and the country. So obviously lofty goals that we don't always achieve, but certainly it fits in with some of those things that we like to think about for the history fair. So if you don't have any questions, that's cool. But I'm here for any questions, any follow-ups. It looks like we probably have maybe 120 seconds, 90 seconds. So if there's anything you might have. Otherwise, you know, thank you for your interest in the History Fair and in CHM, and thank you for teaching during this difficult time.